just from a technical perspective, Saturn is minimally capable of creating order, which is good if you fear like a long lasting order being imposed on you. But like the attempt to impose like the big plan, whoever and whatever faction or person we're talking about, is very poor. Yeah, Saturn is out to lunch with Neptune and letting his 8-year-old grandson run things for a couple of years. A lot of stupid things are possible.
Do they know it's Spacemas time at all? Austin Coppock, welcome back.
Thank you, Gordon.
All right. Here we are, end of 2025. I do love doing 6-month episodes, if only to remind myself of how fast this incarnation is going. 6 months since the last one. Here we are at the end of 2025. How are things?
Things are good enough. Things are always a little hectic in Astroland in December. You know, instead of being a light time of year, it's the time to stress out about the entire future, like specifically the year ahead. But like, it's really hard to think about the year ahead without thinking about the context of the decade ahead and, I don't know, the century ahead and whatever. So it is a time of study and the weight of history, which is kind of fun, but you know, in a specifically stressed out nerdy way.
No, good. Well, we hope to capitalize on some of that. But as we usually do, let's do a retrospective. Let's look back over, in particular, the last 6 months, because I think that that comported with what we suggested rather well. But 2025 in general, but in particular the last 6 months, I think the map matched the territory pretty well. Thoughts?
Yeah, in particular the predictions of rot, and living in the context of rot. If we're going to do metaphorical, I feel like I still can't come up with a better match. Like all of the signs that the structures have lost and are continuing to lose integrity, but are still kind of standing-ish. That whole like that vibe, that environment, that sense, the sense of living in that atmosphere, of living in the building with rotted supports that hasn't collapsed yet, but it makes you very nervous to go about your business and sleep in it. Very real. And all of the, I don't know, it seemed like in October, there began a torrent of why haven't things collapsed yet, or things are going to collapse next Tuesday. Stories on the internet and in mainstream media. And a lot of figures and facts, especially here in the United States, supported that, where nothing grew except for investment in AI. And that made people very nervous.
Yeah. The backsliding into the water and ending up with that like warm trench water, or buildings in Venice kind of vibe. And I thought of another one. I thought of another metaphor. It's like swamp ass. Like that's exactly what it was.
Well, and you know what's funny? Well, funny. What's unfortunate for me is how literal some of that was, in terms of I got like real sick twice this season. I usually don't get sick in a given year or two, and so I got sick 2 months in a row back to back. Like actually couldn't do anything. Just sitting there shivering and fever sweating, sick, which was pretty fun. And I just, I looked back and cursed the various trench rot disease metaphors.
Yeah, exactly. It all lined up, like like going back to, but also not progressing on like, an Epstein narrative and like, yep, we're doing it all again. We're doing all of this again everywhere.
Yeah.
And
when it's like, right, which is a good exploration or guide to how deep rot is and how many different things it penetrates, but it's not the satisfying and horrifying collapse of the
Yes.
structure. It's not revelatory. There's no delightful ending, delightful or horrifying ending. And that made me think of it. It made me think of one of the configurations that we talked about last time that is still present and has been present almost all or since September, but that I didn't explicitly talk about, which was the Saturn with the North Node, aka Rahu or the Dragon's Head, is in a natal chart in the Vedic astrology tradition that I studied in, seen as a combination, which in an individual's natal chart can indicate a bad death and difficulty passing from this life into what comes next. It's basically an indicator for somebody who's going to get stuck, or if you've got it in your chart, it's often an indicator that one of your parents will have a hard time. But it's an indicator of like a bad ending that it's hard to let go of.
Mm.
And that bad ending has that like bad ending combination is stuck in my mind, where like a lot of bad unsatisfying endings that don't allow you the release of like full collapse or tragedy, but just kind of keep you on the hook. And that combination works with Saturn, or that combination is present with Saturn with either of the nodes. And so the last time that we had that was actually in 2019. And it was really interesting because that's when Game of Thrones ended badly. That's when the new Star Wars trilogy ended on a very unsatisfying note for people. Like these like endings that sour everything that came before them, right? Like that make you
Interesting.
rethink the whole story. So yeah,
This is
that's another. It's just
Astrology is a
something.
funny one. So, yeah, I caught a video the other day which made me think about the new Neptunian Aries era that we're talking about, which is that there is rumor that they will retcon the last decade of like garbage, the last decade of like this stuff, the woke, disappointing nonsense that's ruined it. There is a rumor that it will all be retconned and it'll be like it was a dream all along, or who even knows, but like they'll just switch it back. And that's very interesting and very like, oh, we need a new hero's tale. Neptune and Aries era. We'll see.
That feels very par for the course these days. There's been a lot of like, let's just not talk about it. Like with
Yeah.
big things, with small things, it's like, let's just move on. Look at the new thing.
Yeah,
We don't
I
need to
agree.
understand what's happened. We definitely don't need to like rethink our decision making process or try to extract hard wisdom from it. Let's just move it on. And so yeah,
Yeah.
and so our our bad ending that we would rather forget configuration lasts until February of next year of 2026. We got 2 more months left of the pause that has not
Does not
refreshed.
refer. Yeah. So Swamp Ass dries up at the end of February. It's a very dry month here. So
Yeah, it's
yeah.
there'll be a flamethrower blow dry on the ass.
Very cool. Well, anything else we need to, because that's a good example of like, okay, whether we want to or not, are we taking from 2025 into 2026? And let's kind of look at the overall arc of the year before we do the half, right? So 2026, nested in context, top line shape of where we are.
Right. Well, okay. So if we're looking at all of what we can draw from 2025 and apply to 2026, um, the like fast and crazy seeming out of nowhere, out of control, or boy, that escalated quickly facets of 2025 were the ones that occurred when the outer planets moved into the positions that they'll be in for all of 2026, all of
Yeah.
2027, a good chunk of 2028 and beyond. Like the swamp ass period that we're getting towards the end of now that we're just talking about, that's over once we get to mid-February and doesn't come back. And so
Yeah.
it's the like fast, crazy, seeming out of control, questionable decision making, decisive but with bad judgment sort of 2025 that we get for a lot of 2026.
decisive but with bad judgment. Yes. Yeah. Bit of a thing. God. All right. But because when we were doing the planning for this call, I think it was 24. The first half of 24, we were talking about like not to be distracted by the fireworks. Like it's going to look
Uh-huh.
like war or whatever, and then not be. This time you can be. Like this the step change in reality that happens. End of film. You can be. No, when I say distracted by it, it's like that's not a trick. That's what it is now. This is the new thing. So it's not a false dawn, it's an actual dawn.
Right. Well, and that, like that speaks to the nothing ever happens meme. I
Mm.
think, and so things kind of happened, but then kind of didn't in 2025.
Yeah.
And so I think with 2026, we enter the era of things actually happen.
Yes. Agreed. Yeah. That's so all right. Shape of the year then. So we've spoken about, and we'll get into detail because it's H1. There's the new reality emerges with the drying off of this one past Saturn and so on, moving into where they're going to be for a minute. Like all the outers from Saturn out, where they're going to be for a minute. I guess that's April for Gem. But what else do we need to know about the general shape of the year? Not too much. Like there's the switcheroo in June, or there's a surprise bitch in June. But like, is there anything we need to say about? Oh, I know what it is. We need to talk about early 2027 so that we can talk about the shape of 2026.
Yeah. So, okay. So the way I'd like to approach that is 2026 has a lot of big exclamation point Mars moments, which 2025 did not have, which 2025 did not have. So, uh, so really, to simplify, there is in April a Mars Saturn co-presence. The Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries is visited by Mars from April 10th to May 18th. Mars Saturn is a big, bloody, loud, fiery deal. Always is. And
Sure.
then about 2 months later, in early July, leading up to the 4th, we have Mars conjoining Uranus in Gemini for the first time. Mars Uranus combinations are, how should we say, explosive, jarring. The last Mars Uranus conjunction we had was at the end of Taurus, and that was within a day of Trump getting his ear clipped by the assassin's bullet, right? Like they're potentially game changers, and this will be the first one we have in Gemini. It is well worth noting that Mars together with Uranus in Gemini was present in the United States Declaration of Independence chart, and that a lot of my country's sort of big crazy ass moments, such as in World War II, such as in the Civil War, have come during Mars Uranus in Gemini together moments. One of which being the only military deployment of nuclear weapons. The bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki was during a Mars Uranus conjunction in Gemini, right? And the twin bombs, the twin bombs were released. So I'm not suggesting we're having Hiroshima and Nagasaki as early as July, but it is a combination that has uh, uh, a lot of history and ties into the U.S. chart and the trajectory of the United States through history. We will get two more of those before Uranus is done with Gemini, one every 2 years. Um, And then in the fall, actually specifically November, we have a really interesting combination of where we have Mars conjunct the South Node or tail of the dragon and Jupiter at the end of Leo for quite some time. I'm still thinking about that one, but it's very significant. And then that leads into the very end of the year where things have seemingly kind of gone quiet as Mars has entered Virgo, but it's in at the end of the first week of 2027. Mars stations retrograde in Virgo, and we will have a hell of a retrograde. not too long into that. Well, maybe what is let's see, it would be in the second half of February of 2027. We have a big bloody moon eclipse right on top of that Mars
Yeah.
retrograde, which really puts a lot of exclamations around it. So we've got several like big Mars things, and there are other unpleasant Mars things, but
Yeah.
those are the ones those are the tier one Mars moments. And yeah, I'll just stick with that for
Yeah.
now.
Because when we want to talk about 2026, there's some stuff, particularly in January, which we'll get to now, which is almost like the beginning of a Mars story that extends outside of puny human calendars. Like it's not so much that it's a multi-year, it's like stuff that's going on carries on past the next Christmas, and you kind of need to know that to talk about this, because we're looking at war patterns in an age of air. And one of the things we spoke about was, well, what does that look like? Because the various models that I'm looking at here have war running for too many years for an era in which we have things like drones and nuclear weapons. We have like this long period of wartime, as if we're still doing trenches and things. And it's like, well, how is this going to play out? And we had that discussion. It's like it's like tornado weather. Like it's 80% chance of war weather for longer periods of time, and how we at this side of it look at where that may potentially condense is telling stories of Mars.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that was one of the things I've been trying to do and succeeding to some small extent is get a sense of what is normal during the periods of time that are the age of air, which is 200 years at a time, where Jupiter and Saturn conjoin in air signs, because we just entered that at the end of 2020, early 2021, and it's the beginning of 200 years. And so when we look back at those periods, which are roughly 1200 to 1400, roughly 400 to 600, roughly 400 to 200 BCE, we see a number of patterns. Number one, it's where all the good plagues are. And so plague, plague is normal. But I was specifically interested in thinking about war. And in addition to having some sort of big conquests that break up existing sort of ossified orders, such as Alexander's conquest of the Eastern Mediterranean, or the Genghis Khan's conquest of most of Eurasia, or the I guess Western European conquest of the Western Roman Empire. Again, all of them serving to break up ossified empire structures that had developed during the previous age. But once you get past those big dramatic ones, you have a lot of chronic conflict where things don't really get decided. One of the better examples of this that also can stand in for some of the others is that we get the first like 60 some years of the 100 Years' War during one of these air eras. Where there's like this 2-decade period that's still part of the 100 Years' War, and then this 15-year period, which is a different section of the 100 Years' War. And as I was looking at that, it made a lot of sense of some of the things we've already seen, where even though big things happen, like there's been a tremendous and bloody land war in Ukraine for years now, and Israel and Palestine have never, or I don't know. This is the bloodiest. This is the bloodiest conflict they've had for ever.
Since Israel, yeah.
Yeah. Like this is number one. And as well as in the United States, just like dropping a lot of bombs on Iran sending a lot of rockets to Israel, and yet it's sort of somehow not broken normal. It's just sort of felt normal. And so when I was looking at the history, this sort of like, oh well, yeah, it's 100 Years' War. Like these
Yeah.
things just like it's fires that just don't go out. or they gutter for a while, but then they're relit in 2 years or 5 years. And so it seemed, again, I'm trying to adapt my thinking to what is normal in the era that we've just entered into.
And I think for a specific World War III moment, and you said this not last yes, last year, because it's the end of 2025, that it's going to look like, which technically all world wars are, but we know everyone knows what we mean here. Like it's going to look like the reignition, coming back to guttering fires, of like conflict lines wherever they happen to be, like North and South Korea, et cetera, et cetera. That's what it looks like here, because it's air. It is that. It's not like, well, here's the battle line, and here are my trenches, and here are your trenches, and let's just have at it, and let's just attrition each other, and then sign a treaty and move on with our lives.
Right.
Is
And
not
that's
what
because,
it
and
looks like.
it's understandable, but I think confusing that we have this sort of idea of war set by the last 100 or even last 200 years,
Yeah.
where it's like a huge deal. It's very climactic, and then it's over very finally, and the world has changed in the wake of it. And then we live for decades in the wake of that solid structure, which is left behind by a climactic conflict. And I don't think, yeah, I don't think we have. I don't think we have the same intensity and then resolution, like clean if devastating resolution structure for this century. I don't think that's what war is going to look like.
No, very good. All right. So with that as the wider context, shall we? What do you think? Shall we go month by month or transit by transit? What are you feeling?
Yeah, I think month by month is a pretty approachable way to do it, and not too out of sync with the way the planets are moving this year. So,
Awesome.
the first month of the year, January, is a standout in terms of how many planets are not visible in the sky. We have Mars and Venus, and then for a lot of January, Mercury all hiding behind the sun's radiant skirts. You won't see him rise, you won't see him set, with the naked eye. And so where have Mars and Venus and Mercury gone? And so they're all doing conjunctions with the sun. They're all doing, which, are literally, visibly like a very important meeting that you can't see. Like
Mm.
it's consequences, the consequences of what's planned may be very significant, especially in retrospect when you look back, at that time. But you can't see what's going on, and it's really, and so all the planets do this. They make a conjunction with the sun relative to our position. We can't see what happens, but that's considered the beginning of a cycle, right? The most obvious version, or the most approachable version of this, is the new moon, which happens every month, where
Yeah.
sun and the moon conjoin, but you can't see the moon during that time. What are they planning? And so to have basically Mercury, Venus, and Mars, to have all three of them doing these the same month is somewhat rare and significant. On an on a personal or an individual level, this feels like there's a lot going on inside, and you'll be thinking a lot about the last cycle for Venus, the last cycle for Mars, and then the much shorter cycle for Mercury. But there's a Janus facing, considering the past and thinking about what you want to do going forward, right? Which
It's a beautiful, like on an individual, like on a microcosmic basis, it's actually a really delightful time to have this happen, like January.
Right, like there's
Yeah.
yeah, right, like how convenient. People, culturally, there's a lot of pressure to do that anyway in January, right? And it's kind of nice that we have three planets all doing that in a short period of time. And of course, important decisions, important like weighing and judging and sorting and keeping and discarding, like, do need to take place under cover of darkness, right? Like
Yeah.
under beneath the rays of the sun. Um, yeah, like so the how should we say?
It's literally like love, fitness, and money. Like if you think about the three of them that are there, those are the resolution. That's what you should like. Let that be the I'm going to sit and do my weighing and visioning
Yeah, yeah.
with that energy.
Right, Mars, like, what's worth fighting for, right?
Mm,
What where does my capacity for struggle go, right? Because
yeah,
we have a finite capacity for struggle, but where we invest our struggle can pay off quite a bit or create more problems, right? And with Venus, it's like, what is actually worth anything, right? Like,
yeah.
um, what do I love, right? Who do I love? And then how am I going to do that? Move closer to that, maintain that, et cetera, et cetera. And then, yeah, Mercury, what are my sneaky little moves, right? What are my, where does my cleverness go?
On a geopolitical basis, something that has emerged over the last year is the most important factor in geopolitics is who is and isn't in the room. So if you look at the Trump White House's negotiation tactics, and some of them are quite good, frankly, of like isolating the bloodthirsty EU plans from trying to de-escalate and solve. Even without that, it's a game of who is and isn't in the room. Like, can Callas permanently remove Russia from the G8 if they ever get back in? Is who is and isn't in the room? There's the peripatetic nightmare that is Trump's son-in-law showing up everywhere, like, oh, I'm going to run a Gaza rebuild. Now I'm in Moscow. Who is and isn't in the room and thus who gets to hear what is spoken about and what plans are made is like
Mhm.
the geopolitical moment. And so when we look at January, and then when we look at which has these secret meetings configuration, and then we look at what the rest of the year is going to do, whilst it's quite nice on a personal basis, some significant meetings will happen in January that we will not be privy to
Yeah, and
unless
there
Jared Kushner listens to this show.
right. Well, and there are right, and this is significant because, like, each one of these cycles is meaningful in and of itself. But having all three occur in a short time frame, is pretty unusual. And so it means four planets in the same sign right next to each other, and that gets called in some older texts an assembly of planets. And
Mm,
I like that language, this assembly, and then this assembly moves together for a while. Like already as we're speaking, Mars and Venus are not really very visible without ideal viewing conditions. And so what's, I suppose, a little bit more ominous is that this assembly of Sun, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, shortly after making those conjunctions with each other or making those conjunctions with the Sun, all four of them move across Pluto, or our new friend Pluto in Aquarius. And so, what is that? From the 19th to the 26th of January, we have four planets all conjoined Pluto exactly. If you looked at the chart for any one of those days, it just looks like a pile of stuff on top of Pluto. And so, we have Pluto in Aquarius, since it's moved in a couple years ago, seems to be primarily correlated with the with AI, with not for a little bit now, but with the like alien stuff,
yeah.
alien stuff is like one of the thought forms around Pluto and Aquarius, but the AI stuff, as well as the sort of looming threat of cyberpunk tech company oligarchy as the governance system for the
Yeah.
century. And so, one example of conjunctions with Pluto giving these kind of vibes was the Trump inauguration last year, or the beginning of this year, which had conjunctions with Pluto, and in at which the presence of tech oligarchs was conspicuous and widely commented upon.
Yeah. This is metaphoric, potentially literal kissing of the new Archon ring. And it's like, it feels to me like, oh, it's go time on this plan. It's this whatever that happens to be. I think it's go time on the EU false flag that happens a little bit later, but it's definitely like go time on the plan. Like everyone has to parade in front of the new Lord of the Underworld's throne, right? So it's like go time on like, oh, I guess everyone is on board with basically Peter Thiel and the rest of those nightmares' vision for what the world. Whether that they achieve that is different. It does
Right.
seem like that's what that looks like to me. Those
But
two things look like secret plan that then gets signed off by the new Lord of the Underworld.
yeah, that's certainly like 4 planets conjunct Pluto. It's literally an assembly before the weird planet that's not a planet, that's just kind of lurking at the edge of the solar system party and staring in enviously.
The FOMO planet. Yeah, the planet of FOMO.
So, but
Awesome. And
so
go
I
on.
I think that yeah, and so I think January will be relatively quiet, right? Because there's a lot happening beneath the surface. There's a lot, and that's true internally as well. And the Pluto internally, right, is like how are we adapting to the amoral evolutionary pressure of the present? And I mean evolutionary in the like cruel Darwinian sense rather than in the
Transformation.
spiritual
Yeah.
unfolding sense. Like Pluto often represents this amoral and potentially illogical set of forces that are nonetheless very powerful during a time period which we have to adapt to, whether it makes whether we should have to or not. And it's like, okay, how are we adapting to the powerful but amoral sort of current shaping the present?
Very Borg. We will adapt. Like yeah. Pluto and Aquarius said with Borg voice, yeah, we will adapt. That's good. That's a really potent way of framing how you listening to this sit with what Pluto does in your life. It's like you're like you don't get to decide if you want this or not. This is what's happening. Borg adapt.
Yeah, or how to resist being Borg adapted. But like the
Very
Borg are
good.
there and adapting the environment to the cube. But it's like, okay, so that's the situation. You can't be like, well, that's really wrong. We should somebody should do something about that. Like the Pluto is always nobody's doing anything about it for quite some
Yeah.
time. Right. It's here. And so how are you adapting to that situation? Or how are you effectively avoiding it, which is one of nature's top 3 adaptations is don't be there.
True. True. Alrighty. Anything else for January before we move into the most exciting one way or the other couple of months?
Yeah. At the very end, Neptune sneaks back into Aries and will be there for 13 more years. So the sad but beautiful dream of Neptune and Pisces is finally over. And the like exciting, heroic, and potentially violent and stupid dream of Neptune and Aries is here, right? It's here until almost the end of the next decade.
Nice. Nice. All right. So February,
So,
March,
right,
April.
right. Yeah. So, right. It's a 1, 2, 3 punch, which is almost as common as the 1, 2 and somewhat more effective. It is the eve of Valentine's Day here on the North American continent when Saturn moves back into Aries. Right, we had this retreat back into Pisces, which began in September after having a preview of Saturn and Aries as a treat from the end of May until September. But come February 13th, Saturn is back in Aries until the second quarter of 2028. And again, that is whereas the Saturn Pisces is the sort of gives us that moist, sodden, rotting trench foot. My dreams have curdled, and my hopes have turned to I don't know if maybe despair, maybe just disappointment, et cetera, to the like, let's move fast and stupid. That's the Saturn and Aries way, right? They'll like be decisive regardless of how good your judgment is. Or your things are decided and you just need to keep up, right? It's that energy, which we saw particularly over the summer, well, here in the Northern Hemisphere in 2025. And so Saturn is not only back in Aries, it's with Neptune, and the two make the only perfect by the minute conjunction that they're ever going to make about a week later. And so the Saturn Neptune conjunctions are pretty important. They're about every 36-ish years. Um, and it's the collision of the how should we say, the judgmental, practical things. Things have mass and cannot coexist in the same space. Saturn principle with the power of dreaming with Neptune. And so part of what this does is it confirms some dreams or visions, makes them real, and it also demolishes other
Yeah.
dreams. Right. In
One of the things,
general, in general, it tends to be, even though, it is important to note which dreams make it through the Saturn Neptune conjunctions, which ones are confirmed. Usually, it's more of a period of disappointment, or
yeah.
confusion,
Yeah.
because the dream logic really fucks up all of the like real and measurable things that are Saturn's job to oversee.
I did the Cass Tyndall's Year Ahead workshop the other week in Brisbane, and one of the ways she categorized it, which is sort of what you're saying there, is what you thought was real may turn out not to be real. And that's in your life, that's in how the world works, or so on, because it's kind of an interesting combination, right? Because Saturn's in full there, so it's not so much Saturn isn't the stronger player in it, in the sense of it's not only crushing dreams, it's actually the opportunity to thoughtfully construct a new reality for oneself moving forward, like the building a cathedral idea. But it's also Neptune's coming in to show what is a real structure and was not, and is not, right? So it's a very interesting, powerful moment, I think.
Yeah, it is. And it's interesting because the two have been so close for years, but in Pisces. And so they only finally make perfect contact in a different sign, in Aries. And they conjoin in the very first degree of Aries, of 0 Aries, which is a very powerful place. It's where the sun is on the day of the equinox, the vernal in the north. And so it's a very powerful initiatory position. And so, yeah, it's the beginning of new dreams that would become real, and then end of a cycle for dreams that bid to become real. And some of them will sort of get the official stamp, right? Like you get to continue into the next 36 years, and then others, which are shorter lived, will be threshed and returned back to the compost pile. And so, in addition to that, the Saturn Neptune conjunctions, for whatever reason, play a very conspicuous role in Russian history. Um, During the last exact conjunctions, which were in 1989, we saw the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the departure of most members of the Warsaw Pact, which led to the dissolution of the Soviet Union about 2 years later. The one before the Saturn Neptune conjunctions before that, which were in the early 50s, saw the death of Stalin and a very meaningful directional shift in the Soviet Union. The one before that the ones before that are the beginning of the Russian Revolution, not the conclusion, right? Because the Civil War lasts several years, but the beginning of the Russian Revolution in earnest. And then the one before that is the assassination of Tsar Alexander II? And then the one before that, there actually isn't a crazy, there isn't a crazy historical moment in Russian history. We can go back further and we get other significant moments. But we do have to go back to 1846 for a Saturn-Neptune conjunction that isn't really pivotal in Russian history. And unless the birth chart is the wrong year, which it could be for Vladimir Putin, he was also born during during the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in the early 50s. And so we also have a leader that has that signature. And so just with this, now that we're in Saturn-Neptune town properly, it's one can't not watch Russia, right?
Yeah.
Because most of the time it's a really big fucking deal. Maybe this is like the 1846 one where it's like a lot of Europe is having revolutions, but the Tsar keeps things relatively stable-ish. But there are parallels we could draw to some of the other instances. And it's worth noting that even though the two conjoin exactly for the one and only time towards the end of February, they will be co-present, right? They will both be in Aries and sharing space until the second half of the second quarter of 2028, right?
Yeah.
So that's a big deal. That Saturn-Neptune is a big deal. And in order to accentuate it, we have an eclipse that is ruled by Saturn. We have a solar eclipse in Aries, a solar eclipse in Aquarius, which is ruled by Saturn, within a day and a half of that exact conjunction of Saturn and Neptune. And so, I believe, what is that? The 18th of February, we have a solar eclipse in Aquarius, which is not only occurring at the same time as that Saturn-Neptune conjunction, but is also directly looking to Saturn for quote unquote guidance. The wisdom, the wisdom and sobriety of said guidance, I greatly doubt. But it's like it's the first of the string of firecrackers that goes off during H1.
Yeah. We'll talk about it a little bit later as well, I suppose. But in terms of the various arrays in Armstrong's model, February is a panic cycle in most markets, particularly European ones. So like February, March is the most kinetic moment, followed by August for panic cycles. And the way they're showing up is it's usual, like there's a 60%, if you unfocus your eyes, alignment here because it's Europe. So it's consequently Russia more when it comes to this year and that moment. So it's one of those like, yeah, okay, cool. That's the step change. And it's almost like coming back to what Cass said. It's like, you'll know what isn't real. What you thought was real maybe wasn't, can be things like peace agreements and so on. Because if we look at what the arrays are, it looks to him like it's going to look like in January, February, peace is going to break out, but it won't. So that's the surprise switcheroo towards the end of Q1 for him that's showing up in different currencies. And it's that step change into, oh no, actually, this is what we're doing. This is the thing.
Yeah, I think it'll be really like that second half of February will be really jarring. It's also worth noting that eclipse, which is the 17th, not the 18th, is co-present with Mars, right? So in Aquarius, you got Mars, Pluto, and then Sun, the Moon doing an eclipse, which again doesn't look particularly peaceful. I would not look at that and think peace, but I don't know. There are so many surprises and moments that will seem crazy or nonsensical this year that I'm ready to not be surprised by being surprised.
Good point. And that's an eclipse. But it's also, we were talking before, and let's move on to it. Like, that's a theme that runs for the next couple of months, almost like a head injury. And it's like, wait, my head is spinning. Let's see if I can't get reality to stabilize. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and we kind of like that eclipse is sort of our uh it's the all aboard the crazy train,
Mhm.
which keeps going but has distinct phases for the next couple months. And so as we get into the end of February and the beginning of March, we're waiting for the other eclipse to drop. And that second eclipse will be in Virgo. And excuse me, yeah, that second eclipse will be in Virgo on March 3rd. And we have opposite that, like on the other side, with the sun, we have Mars and Mercury, which is stationing retrograde. And then what we have for a lot of March is the aftermath of that eclipse, which is in Virgo, so it's Mercury ruled, right? Like the site of destruction, the site of whatever eclipsing, is Mercury's terrain, right? It's in Virgo. And so we look to what's going on with Mercury, and Mercury is in like a almost perfectly awful condition for all of March. It is in the sign of its fall, Pisces, right? Which Pisces is great. Mercury is great. It's very hard to do details and accounting and all of the like clever and clear distinctions that mercurial work depends upon in Pisces. So Mercury is in its fall. It is retrograde. It is the ruler of the eclipse, and it is also right there with Mars, and right there with the Dragon's Head or the North Node for pretty much that whole time. And so it's Mercury retrograde, but with a variety of performance enhancers injected
Mm.
into it. It's yeah, potentially like quite dangerous confusion, miscommunication, misinformation, like it's you know it's standard Mercury stuff, but it is more dangerous and conf- yeah, the confusion is is much more dangerous than usual.
Yeah. Okay. Could also be capital controls. I mean, it's not quite restrictive, but that's one of the things that comes with war in Europe is they'll get the first digital currency grid. But I'm expecting that more on the trines. But it's interesting you say it that way. Like, well, what is it confusing? Like, I don't know how this is going to go. Can I move this? Does this still work? Does this currency still work? Seems that kind of because it's Pisces. Seems kind of like all right.
Yeah, and with Mercury, you have like this back, you have the back and forth.
Exactly.
Because it's retrograde, right? Where you're like, well, I thought it was going this way. Actually, it's going the opposite. But now that I look at it, maybe it's what I first thought. But like, again, an extra lack of clarity, which makes making smart or clever moves very difficult during this period of time. We
Yeah.
also have the Mercury delivering very bad news, with it
Yes.
being with Mars and Rahu.
When you
It's
roll
worth
out something like capital controls, it doesn't like it is that. It's like, oh well, what if I need to get money to a charity in Africa? It's like I think that's allowed. Just give me a minute. Like, it is actually not. It's a very retrograde process anyway, right? Because it's like, wait, so but does that mean this now that we have a digital currency, can I still use this bill for €100 and up? It's like I just that. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like, disastrous rollouts of some technical system change would be very par for the course. We had a pretty nasty Mercury retrograde in Q4 of 2025, and that's when Windows rolled out, or the mandatory hop to Windows 11 happened, which was their least popular, most most bemoaned system change for 20 some years.
Mm.
Like that sort of thing. We're like, oh, we're doing it this way, and it's a fucking nightmare. That right, like that's very
Yeah.
normal for this kind of hyper afflicted Mercury situation.
Yeah.
Um,
The yeah, interesting. Very cool. No, very cool. Like, all right, that's gonna be Yes.
Yeah. And so
That's going to
what's
be the thing that comes after the end of Feb. All right.
yeah, and what's interesting is it actually resembles March of 2025 a lot, which had a lot of really had similarly confusing configurations, but Mars wasn't involved in 2025. So it was more like damage through confusion and volatility, but there wasn't like you didn't have Mars Mars the damager, the burner, the cutter, as part of it. So it makes it, it's like it's one thing to be clumsy, to run and fall down. It is another thing to run with scissors, right?
Mm.
And to be clumsy and fall down. And so there are scissors in Mercury's hand this time, which makes it, yeah, more of an issue. It's worth noting that Jupiter is configured in such a way that there are a number of worst case scenarios that won't quite happen. There's going to be some like saving grace stuff. There'll be especially on an individual level, a potential for repair that doesn't have to be part of this worst case scenario for Mercury. But it is, right? Like Mercury's still in this terrible position. All these things will tend to happen, but a little saving grace, a little potential for remedy or repair is ambiently present, which is nice. And so
Mm.
just as this is kind of winding down this really confusing period, right? Which we went, just to recap, right? We went Saturn and Neptune are conjuncted both in Aries. There's an eclipse that references those. Holy shit. And then we go into super confusing Pisces time. And then just as things might be starting to feel semi-sane, once we get to April 10th, Mars moves into Aries, and then we have Mars, Saturn, and Neptune in Aries. And that is, I suppose, one of the things we can say for that is it is not confusing. Mars and Saturn together are very straightforward and brutal, and especially in Aries. And then that portion of events goes from April 10th until May 18th, but the harshest portion of it will all be within April, especially around like 420. We have Mars, Saturn, and Mercury all conjoined within a single degree because Mercury's caught up and wants to join the party. And so Mars and Saturn, the two traditional malefics, they conjoin roughly every 2 years, and it's always it's a concentration of difficulties, right? You have the like hard, slow malefic, which is Saturn, combined with the hot and the fast, which is Mars. And so you have both like slow moving threats, environmental threats, and then like the quick acute threats come together in the same place. So it's sort of maximum damage concentrated in one area. And so that's as like straightforward a set of crises or wars or disasters as we're going to get. Um, and so I was looking for precedents for that. And so the last time that Mars conjoined Saturn and Neptune in Aries, we had the destruction of the city of Port Royal by fire. And you got to go pretty far back to find a precedent. And I was like, well, that works. It's literally
Yeah.
it's destruction by fire. It's in a fire sign. We have the Neptune component. It's very important. It was a very important Caribbean port, and it's just straightforward devastation with Mars Saturn. So that's rough. I don't imagine that peace will break out throughout the world during that period. Um, And yeah, should maybe say something less devastating about how that is on an individual level, because it's not that Mars, Saturn, Neptune will break into your house and burn down all of your port cities.
Well, it depends. Like I've got, you know,
They might.
a moon in I've got a moon in early Aries. So yeah, I might yeah, anyway.
Yeah,
I'll
it's
avoid
and
Port
so
Royal. And I hope the planets lay off Port Royal as well. They had a terrible hurricane this year.
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't need destruction by water and then fire. But
Yeah.
yeah, on a personal level, again, Mars and Saturn conjoin every 2 years. It's not that you've never lived through this horrific conjunction before, but it's maximum pressure in a particular area of life. And very often, what it looks like is being pushed beyond reasonable limits, being worked to the bone, where things are multiple challenges sort of intersect in a way that make things temporarily, seemingly unendurable. They're usually, in retrospect, quite endurable, but it's usually very stressful and really shitty and annoying for a bit.
Yeah. The January configurations, the January transits were better on an individual basis. It's like, okay, cool. So it's going to be hard and tiring, but I will actually get through it because Mars brings the tiring, but also brings the energy.
Well, and
Yeah.
the Mars, like one very like simple lived version of Mars Saturn conjunction is like Saturn. Oh, I'm really worn down, and Mars says, but all of this needs to be done in 2 days, right?
Mm.
And the consequences will be dire, and so it's like having to, having to go, how should I say, get a week's worth of stuff done in a day and a half when you are already burned out, right? Like the
Yeah.
Saturn is like the long term, like you've been accumulating this burnout and stress for months. And it just so happens that that is peaking as this emergency that you don't have the option to not handle comes up, right? Which is like, which is shitty. But again, not beyond human endurance and not apocalyptic.
No. Unless it's Moon in Aries 6. Like I'm not gonna have I'm gonna yes, I'll there'll be some self-care come June.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. And so, you know, I think a lot of this underscores why it is not just potentially pleasant or convenient that we have quieter skies, at least on the surface in January. Um, that like those behind the sun assemblies, I think, offer a period of time to get things together, to on a very mundane level, to establish good habits, to get things oriented so that the 1, 2, 3, the Saturn-Neptune eclipse, the very confusing Mercury Pisces stuff, and then the straightforward brutality of the Mars Saturn, like doesn't just completely fuck your plans for the year.
Yeah.
And so getting like there, it's very difficult to make lasting changes for the better in the middle of like firestorms and confusion, right? So getting that set, setting your trajectory into that 1, 2, 3, that February, March, April, I think is quite important.
Agreed.
And
And so I was even say to know that it's in there. One of the things I was thinking about last night in an Andean context, the main reason you eat locally is because Inti Taita, like so the sun actually beams individualized codes, let's say, for like those local conditions into the plants in the area that you're at. So the reason you eat locally is to get the update. Is to
mm,
get like what the sun god is expecting and has available for you in that area. And it's very interesting that it's sort of like that with January. Like it's when you have the sun conjunctions, they kind of get new like codes, right? Like codes from Inti, and it's like so they'll be in there as they're Mars in particular, but as they're moving around your chart this year, they have got updated codes, and just have faith they'll unpack, right? That's yeah. Eat your Andean potatoes and have faith that the codes will unpack.
I like that. That's nice. And so the consolation prize or the respite begins mid-May, and from mid-May until most of the end of June is I think the best looking stretch of sky in 2026. um the Mars Saturn thing breaks up. Mars is off in Taurus. Saturn's doing still back in Aries. We don't have Mercury retrograde. We don't have eclipses, and both benefics, Jupiter and Venus, are in good condition. We actually have both of them in Cancer for almost a month, and so we have a period that is not only not actively confusing or destructive, but in fact is actively like sweet and reparative,
Mhm.
and coherence building. And so that's like May 18th until end of June ish. And it's at the very end of June, last couple days, that we have a sort of Joker-esque twist that then sets us up for a bit of a crazy train July. Um, we have Mercury, which throughout the second half of June looks like it was just headed towards a nice conjunction with Jupiter in Cancer, but on the 28th it stops 1 degree before Jupiter, and instead of unifying, turns retrograde. Right, it says like, no, actually, we're not going to complete this connection. You thought it was going towards the greater benefic, but actually things are going backward from there. And then the next day, Jupiter nopes out of Cancer and moves into Leo, which is a much harder position for Jupiter, which in practice means less grace, less largesse, less do-overs, less padding. So Jupiter functionally becomes less generous and kind as Mercury says, no, we're not doing that conjunction. And then at exactly the same time, Mars moves into Gemini, which is ruled by the newly retrograde Mercury, and into conjunction with Uranus. And that sets the stage for the July 4th Mars-Uranus conjunction in Gemini, which we spoke about earlier. So we get like this this idle, or this period where it seems like things are going to be repaired or aren't so bad, gets a pretty harsh reversal with 3 factors changing in about a day and a half at the end of June, and then that sets us on the trajectory for July.
Yeah, which is H2. You just mentioned Mars to start with. Is the second half of the year less Mars? Is it like who's the man of the match for H2?
Somewhat less, but still relatively Marsy. So
Mhm.
we have the Mars Uranus and Gemini, and that's a big deal, and that's because Uranus is so early in the sign, that Uranus is so early in the sign that the exact conjunction happens pretty much right away. It's early July. Oh, worth noting, one of the things I missed in the 1, 2, 3 punch of H1 is that Uranus moves back into Gemini
Yeah,
at the end of April, when that
yeah,
Mars Saturn is very hot. Um,
yeah.
which contributes to the overall atmosphere. And then midsummer, mid H3, Mars moves into Cancer, and we get in August, and to a certain degree, to a lesser degree, in part of September, we get Mars in its fall in Cancer squares Saturn in its fall in Aries. And so Mars Saturn squares have some of the same qualities as the Mars Saturn conjunction, but less completely intense.
Yeah.
But there is like a grinding harshness. There is the meeting of like the slow difficulties and the fast difficulties, the accelerator and the brake being hit at the same time, and stripping gears. It's harsh, but not as harsh as the period in April and the first part of May. After
Yeah.
that, Mars goes into Leo, and in the my least well, there are 2 significant moments for Mars in Leo. One is earlier ish, and that is the way that it lines up with the Venus retrograde that we have in October. Venus stations retrograde in Scorpio, and it does so in a T square with a Mars Pluto opposition. So Mars in early Leo is opposite our friend Pluto in Aquarius, and then Venus in Scorpio is 90 degrees to both of them. And so that's like a particularly ugly, harsh, upsetting version of the Venus retrograde in Scorpio, which we do every 8 years. So Mars in early Leo really serves to give that Venus retrograde a really ugly, harsh beginning. And then the last, one of the last really notable Mars moments in 2026 is when it is in late Leo and it's slowing down in anticipation of the retrograde to come. And what we get is weeks of Mars conjunct Jupiter at the end of Leo, which is, in and of itself is a very, it's a jolly conqueror, like big confidence, big achievement sort of configuration. But those two are conjoined the dragon's tail, or the south node, the eclipse point. And so we have like a weird, potentially destructive shadow energy woven into that Mars Jupiter conjunction.
Right.
And although Mars Jupiter, like that jolly conqueror energy, can be great on a personal level, given the context of the world and 2026. I don't like jolly conqueror energy.
No.
Right, like the Jupiter serves to make Mars very confident about doing attacks and waging war.
Yeah.
But again, there's this weird south node shadow over it, and so that's in November, and then Mars goes into Virgo, and there's a square with Uranus. I don't want to talk about that too much right now, but anyway, it seems to like mellow out ish by the end once we get into December. But then we've got the whole Mars retrograde, and Mars is not only going to do the conjunction with the eclipse, coincide with an eclipse, but then about half of the Mars retrograde is back in Leo with Jupiter and with the south node again. And so they're like the end of the year has this very particular Mars Jupiter south node signature, which still thinking through. I'd like to get some more
Yeah.
precedents for that. We'll be able to talk about that in more detail in H2.
Exactly.
But yeah, a lot of
Cool.
Mars moments.
Yeah, this is the 2026 is a Mars year. Like he's going to be man of the match when you think about it. I mean, there are bigger events. It's funny to say it like that because there are more portentous space changes like Neptune and even to some extent Uranus and whatever. But when you think about the amount of stuff, who's doing the most in 2026? It's Mars. Yeah.
Well, and what's significant is that Saturn and Neptune and their big conjunction and co-presence in Aries, it's a Mars ruled sign. So they're looking
It's
to
true.
Mars,
Yeah.
right? Like they're responding to the dreams and the realities, and the space between are both of a martial nature, right? Like what can be achieved, what harms can be prevented. Like, oh, we need to move really fast and harshly to make this dream real. Like it's all framed within the vernacular of Mars.
And the square is in August, isn't it? The Mars Saturn square, you said.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's, I'm not sure exactly how to articulate. Well, it's Mars Saturn, right? So it just has the Mars Saturn harshness, but it's also the two in their signs that they kind of fuck up the most in, right? They're
Yeah.
both in their fall, where Mars has particular difficulties knowing how to like asserting effectively and appropriately in Cancer, and Saturn very often lacks the patience and sobriety necessary for good Saturning and solemn judgment when it's in like fast, kinetic, youthful Aries. And so it's
That,
the same.
yeah.
It's the same harshness, but both at a bad moment.
Yeah. That's the next cluster of panic cycles. So there's the same, they cluster around the war signature march, let's say, in Armstrong's model, and the next cluster, particularly in Europe and currencies, is in August. So you look at them and go, well, is that the reality of, oh, we're definitely doing this war?
Well, and another
Beginning
thing
of
that happens in
August.
like while Mars and Saturn are doing that square in their signs of fall, we get our first eclipse in Leo
Yeah, true.
toward like mid-August. And so that like that yeah, that's two different things, the Mars Saturn and the eclipses, but they also coincide. First eclipse in Leo, it's at the end of Leo. And so that's moving, yeah, like that is moving the eclipse shadow into this new sign. And it is interesting that it is at the end of Leo where we have all of that Mars Jupiter K2 stuff, right? It's in the place marked by the solar eclipse. I don't like making, how should we say, grand historical stuff too much about any one person's chart, but it is worth noting that Donald Trump has the ascendant and Mars at the end of Leo, and
I
that
was just going to say from memory, because you know it better than I do, there's a lot of Leo in that chart. Like you wouldn't want his chart for the second half
no, not for that
year,
solar
year next year.
eclipse,
Yeah.
and not for the Mars Jupiter K2 there, which then recurs again. Yeah, like yeah, that's not the chart you would want to have, and it is also um not if I were functionally a king or my culture's version of a king role, like a president, I would not want a solar eclipse on my ascendant.
No.
You know, the solar eclipses are historically associated with the removal of people in kingship positions. As I was doing research on general things over the last couple of weeks, I stumbled across a couple charts that were kings, or one a French king and one a czar, that were both born right next to solar eclipses. One of them was the French king Charles VIII, who famously invaded Italy in what, like 1495, 97, and began the Italian Wars. But more famous or less famously, bumped his head going down the stairs and fell over dead at 27. And he was born like 20 hours after a total solar eclipse. And I was like, not good for a king. And then as I was checking Russian history stuff, I was looking at the assassination of Tsar Alexander II, and he too he was born leading into a solar eclipse with the sun exactly conjunct the dragon's tail. And
Right.
again, not only was assassinated, but as I was reading the history, that was like the 11th assassination attempt. And so anyway, like whether whether it is bumps on the head, or anarchists trying to blow you up, if you are a king, solar eclipses on your ascendant are not your friend.
Yeah. He's not a healthy man, and so it's the list of things that could eclipse him out grows, right? It's sort of
Well,
can
so
be
the
removed, it can
what's
die,
funny,
can
what is an interesting sort of historical parallel, but is not a prediction, is Charles the Eighth. Well, I looked at the chart of when he bumped his head, and it was a Sun Saturn conjunction in Aries.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, we're gonna have some of those the next couple of years. I wonder if anybody important will bump their head. He's literally
Yeah.
just like going down the stairs too fast and donked his head on the door frame, and then was just done.
Oh. It's last year's conference, immediately after the election, Armstrong said, looking at the arrays, that he thinks Trump gets about 2 years. Like, but he said it in the context of to fulfill whatever it is he's trying to do. But it looked like it's one of those things that, well, 2 years is almost up. TikTok, like it, it actually will be, and we're heading into some very interesting space weather. So,
Well, and
we
it's
shall.
something like that addresses something larger that I think is relevant, which is with Saturn-Neptune in Aries years, it is about as bad a condition as Saturn can be in. And so Saturn gives harshness of order, right? It is the extremity of order, which is a malefic, right? But we need some harshness of order to keep things from being a circus nightmare. And so, just from a technical perspective here, Saturn is minimally capable of creating order, which is good if you don't want if you fear like a long lasting order being imposed on you. But like the attempt to impose like the big plan, whoever and whatever faction or person we're talking about, is very poor. Like Saturn is basically Saturn is out to lunch with Neptune, and letting his 8-year-old grandson run things for a couple of years. It is like it, a lot of stupid things are possible
Yeah,
that are not
that
usually
certainly looks like
possible.
the law and order policy continuing and escalating in a insane direction. Yeah, fair enough. Cool. All right. Anything else, particularly about H2? Anything else to leave people? We did, and I think we'll go with it. The sponsor meme, or the meme that we're refuging under, is from, well, it's the Ron Burgundy meme that escalated quickly, right? So it's the Anchorman meme, which is pretty much the step change jump energy as we move into like late February for that crazy few months, is what I want people, like, kinetically, if you're trying to feel the first half of 2026, think of that meme that escalated quickly.
Yeah, and the way that the way the first half of the year is shaped, I think there creates a pretty practical shape where first month, get things together, right? Because it's going to be a bit of a ride. But there is some space to think through some things and then to set them down in a pattern you would like to continue. And then the last portion, like second half of May in through almost all of June, is really quite nice. And so that's useful as oh my God, when is this over? Or like, oh my God, like it's just been thing after another. Is that just how the things are this year? Is that how life is? Like there's a pretty cushy landing space during the last portion of H1. But the middle is very crazy making, alternately crazy making and brutal.
Yeah. Well, forewarned. But as you say, like, if this is a thing that we're going to do, and there's quite a good window at the end, and also a really nice opportunity at the beginning to do that visioning and planning. So I think, if we're going to go through 2026, and we are, it's pretty sweet. It's a pretty sweet setup to ride the ride.
Yeah, I think it could be a lot less workable. Like we could not
True.
have a sweet spot during the end of H1. We could just go right into more crazy bullshit.
Very true. All right. Speaking of crazy bullshit, what have you got going on for 26?
All right. I'm teaching classes like I always am. I'll be doing another enrollment into my Fundamentals of Astrology program. And let's say mid-January might be, let's say mid-January. The way to keep track of that, as well as to participate in it, is to sign up for my mailing list. I don't put it all over social media. There are just newsletters that go out, tell you when the enrollment is, and then the enrollment itself. With Sphere and Sundry, we made a bunch of stuff. There are a couple really nice pockets of time recently. So we made a bunch of good stuff. More of that will be rolling out throughout H1. We just came out with a Jupiter in Cancer series that I'm extremely happy with. I think you would like it in particular, Gordon. It's the full moon in Aries feeding Jupiter in Cancer, everything. It has a lot of juice. It's surprisingly balanced sattvic, sort of full battery energy rather than manic juice. But it's a lot of juice. Really happy with that
Cool.
series. We called it the Sublime Dynamo.
Very cool.
And then yeah, so stay tuned there. A note about the Sphere and Sundry project is as of that Jupiter series, we have now done every planet in both of the signs that it rules, as well as its sign of exaltation, except for Saturn in Libra, which
Wow.
we have to wait
Little
another
while. Yeah.
15 years for. We did some work with that back in 2014, but that was not 2014, sorry, that was 2012. But we didn't make enough for anybody else. So it's kind of an exciting almost there. And we have, because it's Saturn, we have to wait for another 15 years to get
Yeah.
like literally the last bit. So
Very cool.
it's like a
Very cool.
maturity for the project.
Awesome. Well, all right. We did it. End of 2025, beginning of 2026. Thank you so much. And happy Christmas, everyone, and good luck.
Take care.